Gracious good day. This is Professor Tommy Halstead, and this is a really quick intro to a video that I did of 100 different slides from over 10 hours of video. You see I have my roast hat on, return on capital employed. We'll be talking about that a lot in the simulation. This is for my Mega Sim class. This is for one of our classes that have a lot of ground students in it. Are working adults between 25 and 35 years old. Some are working 10-hour days, 6 days a week, and don't have a lot of time for this capstone class. And yet there's a lot of time required to work with your teams, and hopefully this will help. I hope you'll watch all 10 hours of videos, especially the ones you'll see the playlist in the description below of all the videos recommended within the course. They're also on course materials within your course, and the playlist will be here in the description, but that also includes the playlist of Professor Paul, our course lead, and myself. We made a lot of videos that help with each decision so you know what is needed. My rose hat, return on capital employed, is very important in terms of one of the 6 metrics that the teams are judged on. You can come in last if your team blows the sim and still get an A in the course. You can't get an A if you blow off the sim. You have to participate with your class, and the final presentation paper is honest. It's like, here's what we did right and here's what we did wrong. So let me start sharing my screen here so that we can see our welcome slide. This is our welcome intro slide. Basically, are you pressed for time? Here's hundreds of slides in less than 30 minutes. Take screenshots, over 10 hours of YouTube summarized. So what we're really doing here is we've watched all of the 10 hours of videos, screenshot and taken off all 100 slides. And obviously, if it's under 30 minutes in the slides themselves, I'm spending 5 minutes right here. I got to be about 10 seconds a slide I have time for. So I'm going to just rip through these slides, but it'll give you a real feel for the entire sim, all 5 decisions, and how complex it is and how many working parts are involved. So even if you just lay back for a half hour and watch these go by, you'll get a huge feel for what are the complexities of the mega simulation, and what are the factors involved, and especially what are the decisions that are needed. And hopefully some of my comments will help you make some of the mistakes that some of the teams make early on and not even realizing they can change a certain parameter. I got to decision 4 and one team said, we finally realized we can actually change inventory. That we can invest in plant a period before and get more multiplier CapEx times our forecast and get enough production to meet the demand for that next coming period. And also look at our customers' CapEx and what are they investing in supply. This is all about matching supply and demand. You'll see that as we hit some of these slides. But without further ado, I'm going to now jump into the slides. Move quickly through them. Please pause the video. My comments are quick and rushed to try to get through this because I want to provide this for all the hardworking folks that don't have a lot of time before the sim starts in the next week or so. And I really want to make sure I'll have a checklist there also, which Professor Paul and I did, the big pre-flight checklist of what are the things you need to do. And I'll be mentioning that as we go through the video on the slides, some of the pre-flight check items you have to do. You have to borrow $2,000 at the beginning or you'll fail the sim. There's things like that. You cannot leave a slider set at 0 or it will not validate. You can't run the sim. You cannot have 0 cash or less. You have to have positive cash or it won't run. So there's a few of these parameters that you got to learn or we'll be down to the 11th hour. It's every Saturday at noon. Our validators and the team must finish and validate so that we can run the sim for the whole class. So with that in mind, without further ado, let me see if we can stop screen sharing and jump into these slides. See you at the end for a final comment. Thank you. Okay, now let's remember as we look at these slides that the very first decision is to go and borrow $2,000. You have to do it at the beginning. See where it's circled in blue there? That's where you go. You fill in that box with $2,000 loan amount. Okay, these are a few tips in getting started that you don't want to forget to do. This is just a transition slide, and we're going to jump into the real slides here. I'll only make a couple comments on each because we've got like 10 seconds for each slide. Remember, take a screenshot and copy these if you want to. Here's a slide that shows the very end that you'll get to after 5 decisions. There's all the teams. Yellow team's on top, you can hardly see it. And then blue and green team have switched back and forth several times. You'll see many decisions and how your curves change there. How do you get those to change? This is the engineering slider. On the left, you change those sliders. They cannot be at 0. They have to be at 1. They go between 1 and 10. And then you'll see the financial results on the right of the investment you're making in each car line. This is really where you need to go when you want cheats and tips. This is the Halo interface, and it shows instructor added comments. I will have that when you go to discussion forums. You'll see that I've added a bunch of tips throughout the whole course. This is a slide about lost orders over inventory, a very important slide as we get started, because every decision you have to stay near 0. If you go below that, you'll have lost orders. If you go above it, you'll have excess inventory. This shows you again how all the teams can finish and then go back and forth as they go forward with every decision. So with your first decision, there's not a lot of change. You can see the red team jumped up above all the other teams that time. You're managing the cows, the dogs, the question marks, and the stars with your 4 car lines. And each one of you will take a car line and then meet back with your team. You can take a picture of this, take a screenshot, and we'll describe it later. This is one of the lost orders over inventory. Look at yellow in the center. The closer you are to 0 going across, that means you have no lost orders and no excess inventory. If you drop down, like red way down there, they have a lot of orders and not enough sales. That gap between orders and sales, in U.S. sales or deliveries. If you have a ton of orders, spend a lot on marketing, but you could not deliver those because you didn't invest in production, that line's going to drop down, and you're going to see when it's normalized that you're losing a ton of money because you're spending a lot of money getting revenue, but you're not able to deliver. Supply and demand have to be matched. That's what this slide shows. You can study it at length, and we'll talk more about it. All of these things help you increase your ROAS, return on capital employed. So take a shot of this slide because this is the essence and the key to the entire sim, because you have to go to all the finances every time and match your decisions. You can see the decisions on marketing and engineering on the left, and then their effect on the right in terms of the center line and whether you're above or below it. If you're in trouble in the sim, you can always go towards the center by analyzing your competitors and your customers, looking at each team and then each car line in terms of the strengths and weaknesses, and then deciding to go closer to the center average line to regain. Don't do things like assigning KPIs to a car line such as your low-cost car line and say, price it really low, let's get a ton of sales. If you get a lot of revenues, but without able to produce it, you're wasting your time because you'll see when the sim is run that you cannot deliver those orders. You didn't invest enough in plant and capex on the supply side. Also, if you're getting a ton of revenues, this is one of the annexes that shows your adult, or it shows your visions and your mission, which is the annex. And what happens if you do not get those revenues to match your EBIT, you're going to find out that you're making a lot more sales and you're losing money with each sale. HR and quality is important. Try to get morale up, and morality up too, because we're looking at sustainability. Again, with this annex, I wanted to throw it back in here because you have 3 annexes. The first one is your mission and vision. Then you look at your individual car line strategies, low cost, image, etc. And then you create an action plan for the whole corporation. And every decision round is like that. First you look at the small picture. Each one of you, each of the 4 people take a car line and present your ideas of your action plan. And then the whole team has to look at each one of those car lines and then decide of the low cost and the image and the family and the eco-friendly, which ones you'll put your investments in on a corporate side, and then also plan your plant and your manufacturing to match that with the financials. This is a strategy course, and so you're going to see time and time again that you have to keep iterating through your engineering and marketing slider discussions or decision between 0 and between 1 and 10. And then also benchmark, here's our benchmarking chart, also benchmark what's happening with CapEx in terms of how does your market growth and your share tell you to look at the financials and adjust, course correct what you need to do in production. Every time you're going to need to check your budget to improve your margins and your revenues. So you keep cycling in every decision. You try things, you forecast them, you put the investment in, and before you validate the sim, you go back and look at what happened. Again, if you don't forecast demand, you're going to end up having the wrong amount of supply and capacity and inventory with that lost orders or else excess inventory given your demand. This is the second annex. We're going 3, 2, 1, and this is the one where we're talking about the individual car lines. These annexes, by the way, can be found in your logbook, on the sim, and also in the class resources and on the right side of your resources on decision 2. Some of you have already mentioned the key ratios of profitability, liquidity, and debt, and you'll keep cycling between them in the financials. You'll say even marketing is tied closely to financials because you look closely at revenue and what's happening in terms of all the financials and how they tie to your customers and your competitors, and what are those. That's what the essence of strategy then is, your competitors. How are you going to react to what they did in each of those 4 car lines? Here's the 6 rows I mentioned with my rows hat, but here's the other ones: the accumulated retained earnings, revenues, CO2 emissions, morale, and share price. And those will all change with your decisions and give you feedback on how much risk to take in each car line, and then what are the forecasts for profit. And then you'll benchmark it. You'll find out what is the per unit CapEx and multiply that by the quantity. You'll see there's a slide coming up on that. We always get those questions about how do we do the next decision. You have to imagine where you're going with your portfolio, like BCG and Porter. Where do we want to be with these car lines? Let's milk the cow of families so we can build up eco or low cost. We start with a certain point here where all are the same. It's a turnaround situation. We're underwater, and all 5 teams are going to have to bring it out into the clear air. So we have to see where we want to go with each of those car lines, and then how each of them perform versus these constraints and winning criteria, which are all financial, other than, employee morale and CO2 emissions are for the planet and the next generation. Now, some of these, there's going to be a bunch of slides here that I'm going to go kind of quickly through, but you'll see square boxes. The main thing to look at here is that in addition to the 2 sliders on engineering and marketing, there are little square boxes in the center of these with investment and cash flow and budget. You can change these numbers. It will stop you if you try to change too much and you're getting below 0 cash. So you constantly have to cycle back and forth with your decisions for that whole hour or 2 that you're meeting with your team and say, have we blown a constraint here? Are we going too high or too low in selecting the inventory amount? Is our marketing or engineering budget blowing what we need to do in terms of the features in the plant and our ability to meet that demand? When you validate, you'll again look at all of your financials and say, are we having positive cash flow? Cash cannot be below 0 or we won't validate. You won't be allowed to run the sim. So you have to have positive cash. When you're looking at capacity or CapEx per unit, you look at 75 there. We're forecasting that as our capacity, and then we're multiplying the capacity needed for next period times individual CapEx, and that will give us our investment in plants and equipment, which they always ask, all the classes. This is when you validate. Our validators will get this box that says, are you really ready? And they'll show you the final numbers there. Have you met as a team? Have you decided all of the corporate decisions as well as the team decisions? This is your org chart where you'll keep cycling back between the individual car lines, and then what does it do to corporate? What does it do to the budgets? Okay, are we okay? And then compare it to our competitors. What are the other teams doing, or what are we doing? And as you move those sliders, you'll see some of the forecasted results of where it's going to put you. If you're in deep trouble and you're really lost, go for the middle. Try to stay in the center and say, all right, let's back down in our portfolio. This is the decision in 5 steps. Take a picture of this screenshot. It shows all 5 things you need to do every round with all of your car lines, and then also corporate. After you've decided the individual car lines, you have to look as a corporation and say, what does this do to our future, our mission, our vision, and our values? That's why it's so much like a real business. And your individual car line people will be giving recommendations for each one, but then you have to negotiate. You have to battle each other and say, this is what it's doing to the financials in each one of our car lines. What should we do to get positive cash flow? How can we get our EBITDA up? What are the competitors doing? Can we raise the price here? Can we be, co-opetition? Can we work together to make the market stay high? You don't want to drop your price so low to dump inventory that every unit sale is a loss. You've got to get yourself to a little bit of profitability, even if it's getting a little bit less out of the red. You'll see this in many of the numbers. This is a turnaround situation. You're going to find that it's not easy to even get above water, to get to break even. Yet, if you create a flywheel, a customer flywheel that drives sales, and then a profit flywheel with lost orders and inventory balanced, so you have less, there's hardly any band between your orders and your sales because you're supplying those sales. And you'll see this giant graphic every time the sim is run of like, oh my goodness, look what happened to us compared to red team or blue team or purple team. So you can look at their financials and your own financials in each run, and then figure out from the combination of engineering, marketing, and financials, what are the next decisions we want to make to go for the product lines we have chosen to get major market share in. And remember, the portfolio, you're managing a portfolio. There's no cannibalism here. You have to reset the plants for each one. You have to reset the marketing demand for each one. But don't spend so much on marketing that you can't produce it. Capacity takes place the next decision round. So you have to invest one decision A to get to decision B and have enough inventory in order to meet that demand. So don't drive so much demand that all those orders are lost. Or don't drive so little demand that you built up so much production and supply that you got excess inventory. That's the balancing game of supply and demand here. And it comes from meeting your customer's need. You study economics and you know what a utility function is. It's what do these customers value? And we'll get into that in a few slides here. Now we're getting towards the end of the slides here, so you're getting a lot of information. This is again the validation step that shows once you've gone through all these iterations, you have to validate by noon on every Saturday. Also, don't forget that you can make decisions within a box. You don't just have to do the sliders. A lot of the teams don't realize they can do their budget and say, oh my gosh, I could have invested less or more in CapEx. I had one person ask one of the financials people, say, how do we change CapEx? How do we target it? Well, you multiply the per unit and your forecast demand, set your CapEx at least at depreciation for that plant. If you go below depreciation, you're going to have very low and poor morale. Now you can see the center point of this in terms of engineering and marketing, where you can actually move closer to the center if you're way up or way down in inventory or lost orders. It gives you a chance to be a little more moderate, balance it out, and you can always recover. Even if you're I've had teams that were the last team for 4 decisions and won the game at 5. It can happen because there's so much variability between the customers, the market. Make sure you look at the market, gas prices. There's a lot of macro indicators also. And when you first go on, you'll see what place are you in the teams. And remember, there's menus across the top, menus in the middle, and other pull downs on the left and the right. Don't forget to look at corporate as well as individual car lines when you're looking at these sliders, because these decisions have got to be made both at the car line level and then go up to 30,000 feet and make it at the macro corporate level and say, wow, what's this doing to our overall budget and our overall goal, mission, values, and vision? These are some of the things that show you how do the customers change. This is a very important slide. There's about a dozen like this in all of the YouTubes. And it shows what do you need to do for the utility function into your engineering when you make each of those car lines to get a lot of orders. And you really have to make a chart of what do these customers want and cover that every time and say, wow, we really missed this time. We got no sales on that. And don't over-engineer, because these all really tie together. If you have a value proposition that does not unite with your production and with the customers, then you're going to get too little or too less sales, or too little or too much inventory. Again, this illustrates perfectly. Take a screenshot of this, because you can see if you pick the wrong thing, if you go for 10 here and their demand is 7, or you go 5, you're going to get too low or too high. There's that sweet spot of what the customers want with each one of the car lines. So don't over-engineer, under-engineer it. Obviously, the image car, you can say, I'm going to make a race car, and I'm only going to get 100 customers, but I can price it at X, Y, Z. And look at what's growing. You'll have to look at the portfolio and say, what is growing there, and what is it going to cost to market and produce these? And this also shows your facilities for each one in terms of their sensitivity to economies of scale and the learning curve. You must study those two, economies of scale and learning curve, because they're very important. Of course, CO2 emissions will come. You can say, I'm going to go eco, I'm going to sell 1 million, and your CO2 will go way up because you got so many sales that's producing more CO2 than the images, even though it's a racing car. This is your business model. You need to take a screenshot of that. It's the value proposition. There's a whole long description in the YouTube videos of how these all work together to make you win this sim and give you high marks in it. How does morale happen? Well, it's not just raising wages. That's important, but it's also being successful. Looking at the plant, investing in the plant, and also having revenues and sales. It's really tied to, I want to feel like I'm working for a customer whose whole value proposition is aligning with customers and defeating competitors. So obviously, it's each one of these tie together like a lot of moving parts, and you can see how complex this sim is. It's really like a real business. In terms of leverage, interest rate, don't be afraid to take loans. Leverage is, it'll cause you more interest, but also above break even, it's like printing money. In the basement, below, it's like drinking air instead of gasoline. So you have to be very careful matching your capacity and your supply and demand with the loans you take. But take out $2,000, all 5 teams, first time. You have to. Otherwise, we can't run the sim. You get to running out of money and you need a government loan, which we'll get into later. Obviously, we have to focus on quality, but not over-engineer. It's a sweet spot. People of a family care about dealership access. Image doesn't. I'll go to the one BMW dealer that's 10 miles away, 50 miles away, because I want to get this really exclusive car. Family, no, I want a lot of dealers, a lot of access to dealerships. Again, we're recommending you take that $2,000. Oh, wow. I just stepped on my own self there. And I was saying, don't forget to borrow the $2,000. I want to begin and end with that. Thank you so much for watching our quick recap of all the slides. Just in closing, closing comment here, I just wanted to tell you that this is not taking place. So even if you took screenshots of watching the videos, watch at least the first few. And if you have to go to video 6 first, look in the playlist below. It's how to make a decision, because you need to at least understand before you meet with your teams. The process is get together with the team, organize yourself, text each other, message each other, email each other. I'm providing everybody texts and emails of each one of the teams. We're selecting a team validator to work with me to validate at noon on every Saturday, so all 5 decisions are made on time so we can run the sim. But also you need to pick convener, organizer, CEO, get together, open up a Discord server account for the team, or a Zoom, schedule a Zoom. First Zoom right away. Make sure everyone's watching the videos and understand how the sim basically works. Get the cheat sheets. They're on the right side of resources on decision 2. And also I'm going to have links for the cheat sheets down in the description. So you can also click those and pull the cheat sheets. It shows kind of the things you have to do not to have a disaster with the sim. So make sure you download those, watch the videos, and then in your first meeting, assign car lines. So I'm going to be image. I'm going to make the greatest luxury car or race car or incredible car. If you over-engineer a car and you put too much into added features, you'll initially have a failure rate that's high, and every team will go, what the heck's happened to my capacity and my production? I don't get it. What's happened is when you have a high field failure rate, say that fast 10 times, it means that those cars have to go back to the factory to be fixed. And it lowers your morale and it cuts down on your production because you're fixing cars. It's not like the dealer fix it in the sim. There are certain recalls and things that you have to do within the sim that does, because of the way it's set up, that actually the factory has to fix those things. So again, you'll have a low field failure rate if you don't over-engineer the car. But if you under-engineer it, it's a sweet spot compared to your customer demand, you'll get no sales. So remember the utility function and match up the supply and demand. And I will be sending you many more after the first decision results for each team. We cut a video for each class, each team. You'll be seeing fresh videos made about your results and some suggestions. It'll be posted to everybody. I don't prefer any one team over the other. I love you all. So we'll be showing what team A, B, C, D, red, green, purple, blue, yellow have done and how they can improve on the next decision. But you're here to learn, and the mistakes are what we learn from and remember our entire life, both of our victories and our defeats. And as a chess coach, I always remember every time I play a computer that's rated at 3,000, which can destroy me, of how it classifies inaccuracies, mistakes, blunders, and missed opportunities, all four. And we'll learn that in exponentially here, because there's a lot of inaccuracies, many mistakes, a few really bad blunders, but a lot of missed opportunities. It's like, wow, if I'd only done that, I could have really moved my position here. So teams move up and down all the time with the decisions. It's important that you create a flywheel, and there's more than one. There's, the marketing flywheel where the customers talk to each other and they just are very happy in matching the value proposition. But there's the financial flywheel where you have optimized that balance between supply and demand, have the price in the right place, and have invested in CapEx and in your plant so that you can produce what it is you're selling. You slide either way. You build up a whole lot of inventory if you don't have demand, and if you have way too much demand, you build up a lot of lost orders because you cannot deliver those vehicles that you have done such a great job with the marketing and engineering. So again, check out the sliders. You're going to be into this. Everyone has validated at the point of seeing this video. I don't launch it until everyone has not validated, registered for the sim. And this is before your first decision. We want to give you all this information to start studying, getting ready for it. There's a lot else going on in the class, but remember, every aspect, 95% of your grade and your success depends on the sim and sim and the teamwork. So good luck with it. I hope you all do fantastically, and we'll see you around the bend on the next decision for our next videos on how you all did with that first decision. And remember, text me, email me, call me if you have any problems leading up to the sim, because noon on Saturday is the deadline where we have to validate. Everybody has to have the final decisions in. After you've taken your individual car lines, meet with the team on Zoom or Discord, make your decisions, then look at how it affects corporate and make your decisions. A validator will check in with me and say, okay, we're ready to validate, close it down. Then all 5 teams will run, and immediately within that 20, 30 minutes, rest of Saturday and all day Sunday, you can see the results of all the teams and start making your course corrections for the next decision.